Yes, but right now with us, we know that Guerns are rightly proud of the heritage of the Guernsey jumper, and you'll always find someone wearing one in St Peter Port, come rain, like today, or shine.
But did you know that they're also incredibly popular in the Far East? So much so that a film crew from Japan have been to the island to make a documentary about how they're manufactured. Now, last night, she was absolutely fetching in her onesie for her Squid Games report. Tonight, Kate Pratt was a picture in oiled wool to find out more.
It's a fascination with fabric that spans thousands of miles. An entire film crew from NHK, Japan's publicly funded broadcaster, has visited Guernsey for the second time, with cameras and lights in tow.
We wanted to explore why the Guernsey is so important to people in the Guernsey, and they've got the long tradition, so we want to explore what it means to the Guernsey people, and that's why we're here.
なんか特徴的なデザインがやっぱり人気だと思うので、はい、日本でもとても人気だと思いますね。
Yeah, I can say in Japan, Guernsey is really popular, especially with this traditional and iconic design with this bit of the gazette and things.
The Japanese and South Korean markets make up almost 90% of Paul's export sales. Not bad for a small island in the middle of the English Channel.
We've had Japanese tourists come into the little shop that we've got here, and they're almost giddy with excitement. And they say, "Oh, you're very famous in Japan," and you sort of coyly go, "Yeah, thanks, I know. Yeah, it's a really nice thing." The Guernsey sells in its own right there, but also then they, like this one for instance. Actually, this was one we did for Japan and South Korea. So we've got a crew neck on it, we've got a different cuff, and then two pockets, and it's deliberately slightly oversized.
And more than 200 people turned up in their Guernseys, obviously, when the film crew appealed for a flash mob at the weekend.
The mock seam is so that when you're knitting with a dark wool and by candlelight in the evening, you can feel where you are.
Caro Drake's knowledge of this knitwear is seamless, and she will also appear in the film.
We did go into the history of the stocking industry in the island and how that evolved into the ladies knitting the jumpers, which is why they've got no side seams, because they're knitted like socks. And the story goes that there's a lovely photograph which is just beside this jumper of Mrs. Lalasha, and she was a famous knitter in the 50s, and she was recorded as saying that when you're knitting a pair of socks, you're knitting 4 needles. When you're knitting a Guernsey, before the advent of circular needles, you have 11 needles. And she said it was like knitting with a porcupine on your lap.
It's pockets of information like this that the Japanese crew loved. It seems the respect is mutual. There's a story behind the Japanese pavilion here in Summery Park. It goes that before World War II, Baron James de Summery visited Japan, loved it so much, was intrigued by their culture, that he brought back a replica Japanese traditional house and temple. Sadly, they didn't survive the occupation, but this was built as a reminder of his love of the country. With filming now in the bag, the team is itching to get home to turn their devotion to Guernseys into documentary form. Kate Pratt, ITV News.
Wow, that's brilliant, isn't it?
Who knew that connection?
I know, I had no idea about it.
Yes.
What else can you tell me about a Guernsey?
Well, I was just saying to you, I interviewed Ben Fogle, the TV presenter, about 10 years ago, about his love of a Guernsey.
Yeah.
And he said that it's a little bit like owning a Land Rover, that when you see someone else wearing a Guernsey, you do a little kind of like respectful nod.
That's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah,
Okay,
to kind of acknowledge their good taste.
Well, you give me a little bit of a nod. As a child, I had one as a child, but I found it incredibly uncomfortable. I've got to say, I mean, now I'm obviously much tougher, but at the time, the thought of sort of, rather prickly oiled wool on your skin.
Yeah, I think you have to wear an underlay.
You do, but they look lovely now.
Anyway, talk about layers, you're going to need them, aren't you?
Yeah, you are.
Because before we get to the weather forecast, Jersey Met say they are expecting heavy and persistent rain from tomorrow morning until early Thursday morning, which could cause localised flooding around the islands.
Yeah, if you want advice on how to prepare